That's right.
Yeah, did you know that all the kids that we brought up using Riddle are now crunching it up and snorting it to improve test scores and so forth.
It's a mess among many. I mean, there's so many, but that's a big one.
We got drugs being advertised on TV, so some drugs are okay. One pill makes you smaller, the other pill makes you tall.
Sounds like the 60s. Welcome very much to Conversations, where we pleasure to welcome to the program Executive Director of Manhattan Neighborhood Network, that being Tony Riddle, or Anthony Riddle. And Anthony, welcome really very much.
Thank you, Harold. I'm glad to be on your show once again after about 3 years.
Yeah, that's right. You've had a long, we want to get a report on that and so forth. And we do want to talk, if you can, because you've been not only here in Manhattan, as it were, but you've also been on the scene in terms of this phenomena of public access cable television, which is sort of it's got a unique niche in terms of the communication pattern in the world. And I wonder, maybe we could weave it in with your own background and things you've been involved with. But you've been in the scene of access television for quite a long time. Maybe you could spell that out with a little of your own background, then we could talk about where it fits into an evolving communication system on a national, even an international scale, because it's very important. But maybe you could just share a little of your own background.
Well, I guess I got involved in public access 21 years ago. 21. It was about 1980, and they just came out and shot a play of mine in Atlanta. It was one of the earlier public access facilities, and they needed content, so they came out and shot a play. And
you wrote it?
Oh yeah.
Oh, you playwright? Okay.
Yeah. In fact, I went into playwriting because I, simply couldn't afford screenwriting and didn't have access to people who did movies. I mean, this is before Spike Lee, and so. And just using him loosely as an example.
Richard Linklater made that picture. What was it? The one he made that was so good. I forget the name of it now, but Slacker.
Oh yeah.
It was a handheld sort of thing.
Yeah. So everything was really expensive. I had already pawned my movie camera, and I realized, I wasn't really interested in access except as a way to get equipment.
So you were coming at it from the filmmaking background, filmmaking, video making, and theater.
Yeah, and so I learned to edit and everything, and I became a producer, at People TV. It wasn't called People TV at the time. It was CCTV in Atlanta. And they needed a playback operator, became a playback operator. The program manager left at some point, so, I became a program manager, and all the good people left before me, so I ended up being the executive director, and then later executive director in Minneapolis.
Right.
And at some point was the chair of the National Alliance for Community Media, which represents all the access centers, the 3,000 or so varieties of access centers in the United States.
Okay, now, if we could back up a little bit now, the access center, maybe we should, just in a perimeter kind of way with the audience who's viewing, access cable television is, am I not correct, that it's sort of, in a sense, a unique phenomena in terms of the development of communications. The Sloan Commission report used to refer to cable as the cable system, the television system of abundance, or a great number of channel capacities.
Yeah, a great number being 30 at the time, I think, right?
Well, that was an expansion over what the physics allowed in the spectrum over the air.
This is sort of, you bring up a good point right here, and I think we should pause there, which is that whenever it comes down to the people being able to communicate with each other, here in America, or in Western society, that's always like a secondary concern to business. And the only reason public access even came about in the first place was, as you mentioned, there were anywhere from 3 to 7 sources of programming in the United States at the time. You had ABC, NBC, CBS. That was pretty much it. And then you had, independent programmers, I guess. And so when you suddenly go from an atmosphere of 10 or 13 on the air channels, including the UHF in major cities, to 30, then suddenly it felt like there was an abundance. And so there was room for people who became organized to say that, perhaps we ought to create some sort of community resource based on the cable systems using the community's ground in order to make money. And 30 seemed like a lot, so a station didn't seem like a big deal. And of course we've had these various expansions since then, to 45, 52, 72, 200, and then as we go to digital, there's so much compression that there may be the equivalent of thousands of channels, although I don't really see you having 1,000 channels. You may have that much bandwidth at play. I think right now the system in New York City is about 850 megahertz compared to probably 250 or 300 megahertz, some time ago.
Uh-huh.
So there is sort of a sense of abundance.
Yeah.
And as long as there's a sense of abundance, then there's sort of room for the public to participate. But as that abundance starts getting taken up by various money-making schemes, HBO 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5,
Yeah,
CNN
6,
1, 2,
7,
and 3,
9, 10,
NBC, CNBC, MSNBC, 2, and so forth, then the public starts feeling the pressure of being squeezed out again by business. So in a sense, you brought up what I think is a really important principle of community communications, which is that as long as there's some sense of abundance, the market system will allow for a time the public to participate. But as there becomes pressure on that, then there's always pressure to squeeze out.
Yeah. So but in a historical pattern, it's moving in that direction. It has been moving in the direction from when there was no television, and there was a thing in the 70s, then it was white, black and white, and in color, and it was expanding, and there was an abundance. And probably it's fair to say that even now some people are worried the nation may be hovering on the edge of a sort of a recession. Some people are saying there's been such a downturn in the stock markets and the dot-com things and so on. But the residual of that is because there's been a lot of these developments of bringing us the internet, streaming, all these kind of possibilities. That's going to be there. And it is actually probably true to say that the ability to communicate is expanding very, very rapidly in the time in which we live.
The possibilities are expanding,
all right,
but the actualities are not always expanding. I think a lot of times we talk about these technologies in sort of a far too positive, blue skies way. For instance, the technology as it's on the drawing board for the internet and streaming of video signals and expanded bandwidth and all of those things, seem to have unlimited potential. But there's also the current pressure that's going on for consolidation of ownership of bandwidth by the large companies, of which there are increasingly few.
Ben Bagdicking has been keeping track of that.
It's really difficult, and the attempts to create a regulatory environment which favors complete control of content sources by the large companies, so that, for instance, the internet has all this great possibility, but what most people don't recognize is that you have to use some sort of browser at this point, and you have to use some sort of internet portal, provider. And that there's actual physical wires, generally speaking, or even if you're talking about the wireless internet, there's some limited bandwidth there. And to the degree that a couple of companies can control that, naturally they want to direct you to the various places where they have things for sale, or where they have ideas that will lead you to believe certain things, which of course lead you to places for sale. So, for instance, from the beginning, I always had the feeling that when you use Netscape, for instance, that you put in the words bookstore, and this is a good example. You put in the word bookstore, and it should show you a listing somehow of all the bookstores that are available on the web, that there's some sort of openness there, right? Well, some sort of equality. But this has been a key case that, for instance, in Portland, I think the store is called Powell's. I might be wrong, but I think it was Powell's, which is like the large family-owned, huge bookstore that was in Portland forever, right?
An institution.
Yeah, institution.
Locally,
but at the time, when you did a Netscape search for a bookstore, Portland, the first 5 entries that would come up would be Barnes and Noble, or Amazon, or I don't want to be against one company, but it was one of those. And it really should have been, that store. But the reason is because your browsers are not necessarily transparent, but that various companies are paying for better listings.
Right.
Well, so in a sense, the internet is open and it's free, but in a sense, it's also much like the old Native American lands that were open for the pioneers. You got all these people running out there and staking out land, and then larger companies coming and consolidating it and saying, no, now you can't pass through there. So they're, people shouldn't just take for granted that these technologies are going to be open, transparent, and free. These are things that we constantly have to fight about.
Right. That's a constant fight. But the thing that I was talking about, the public access as it came along and so forth, it was unique in the sense that it was set aside for people. Almost, I don't know if the analogy of Hyde Park Corner that they have in England, where anybody can get up and say what they think, and it's open to the people in that sense.
I'm not sure that's even true now, but
maybe
that was in theory that was true.
You might have to rent one of those
put a flag on that, because there's some privacy issues there that we should talk
Hyde
about.
Park Corner?
Oh yeah.
Oh really? Oh, that's interesting. I know.
Oh yeah, I come to scare you today.
Okay, good. Well, that would scare me, because Hyde Park Corner is an institution that goes way back. The idea, and here you had all these commercial interests, and most of the communications, as is most industry, most development in this country, is motivated by a commercial more orientation. It's toward the market and so forth. But in access, it was set aside. In fact, in access, there is, maybe it's good for people to understand, that they try to make it available to the community, but it's not to be commercial. In a certain sense, it runs counter to the ethos that motivates the majority of the society, and that sets it apart.
Not the majority of the society, the majority of the system.
Of the system, right. Okay, good. That's a good point, yeah. But to that issue, I wonder if we could talk to that, and that people understand that it is a society and it's different. And are there very many sister institutions or movements within the society that are in that bailiwick that the public access is? And is there an alliance between the public access cable television, who's been around for quite a while, almost uniquely so in terms of communication? That possibility was there 20, 30 years ago. And other non-commercial uses of Internet or different kinds of movements within the society, or politically or otherwise. I mean, it's an important frontier kind of possibility that it had that time, and that's an idea that a lot of people take umbrage at, that there should be a place which is not delegated or is not run by market considerations in a time when the market is just is the only thing that seems to be on people's mind.
Well, it's not the only thing on my mind, but of course.
But I meant in the system.
Seriously. It's not the only thing on my mind, and I don't think it's the only. I know you well enough to know it's not the only thing on your mind, but it's promoted as the only thing on people's mind. If I have to hear people talking about their money anymore on television, I'm going to throw up.
It is true. I would say that John Morgan earlier tonight. I say you look at anything, particularly on the news channels, there's absolutely nothing about 401 rollovers and all this kind of stuff, and that's all there is.
That's all there is. The stock market's up, the stock market's down. Who gives a damn, frankly?
Well,
I think this is something that's really been a problem. I know we'll drift around. We'll get back. We have a little time. But, it used to be that a company made money from one profit center, which was it had a product. The product was good or bad and marketed well or not marketed well. And that's how the company went up and down. And when you bought stock in a company, what you were buying was buying into the ability of that company to create a product and reach a market and see a profit. But then somewhere along the way, I don't know because I'm not old enough, but somewhere along the way, the stock market realized there was a second profit center, which was the value of the stock, and that the value of the stock was somewhat independent from the value of that company towards producing something that society needed. That in fact you could manipulate the value of that stock by selling assets or cutting off assets, so that in a sense, if you have, let's say, I don't know, a drug which is valuable for saving people's lives, and the laws of supply and demand say that if you can increase the number of people who are able to use this drug, you can lower the amount of money you need to make per unit and make a profit still.
Economies of scale.
But on the other hand, if instead you're able to drive up the price of the stock
because they got to have it.
By lowering the amount of the quantity of the drug on the market. Then then it's worth doing. So the mission statement of the company has changed. The mission statement of the company originally was to make a profit by helping people. Now the mission statement is helping people while making a profit. So that the profit margin becomes dominant. Because whatever your religion or your philosophy or lack of religion or philosophy happens to be, within the name of it, you can identify, who is God. And when you say capitalism, I'm not a socialist, I'm not a capitalist, I'm not a communist, I'm not a Methodist, I'm an artist sometimes. but the bottom line is this, is that if you say you're a capitalist, then what you're saying is that you have a fundamental belief that the market can find the solutions, and that all we really need to do is to
put our trust in
deal
the
with
market.
that. Yeah, with money, capital.
Yeah.
But the fact of the matter is that money likes money.
Yeah.
Money is just like any other being.
Absolutely.
Just like people want to be around people most
Yeah.
of the time, you know, except for a few hours every once in a while in New York City when you have to be by yourself.
All right.
Thank God. But the money wants to be, so it congregates.
Yeah, right.
You know, it congregates with each other, and it starts going in larger and larger portions. You got all these people who put all this money in the market. The market drops. The money didn't disappear somewhere. The money congregated with people who have money.
Yeah.
And now that the market's going to drop, they're going to come back in and they're going to buy the same stocks that you bought at 150. They're going to buy them again for 20. Even though they sold out at 150, they're going to come back and buy it at 20. And when the money goes up again because you start pouring money in again, trying to get a piece of the action, then they're going to yank it out again, and the money's going to keep congregating and keep congregating.
And also,
and this actually is like a representation of what we're talking about in terms of the communication system. You know, is that if I sound somewhat pessimistic, it's because I've seen the trend. There are like 4 or 5 companies that are able to drive other companies out.
In communications.
In communications. For instance, we're streaming. We buy DSL.
I mean, here at Manhattan
at Manhattan Neighborhood Network. We buy DSL lines in order to get that stream out to the public.
Right.
We bought them largely from third parties, you know, who are selling them. But the fact of the matter is, the lines are owned by the big telephone company. The service that the big telephone company gave us in terms of setting up these lines was horrible, because they weren't, in my opinion, interested in having these third parties as competitors.
I see, right.
And so the service was second rate.
I see.
And then the service goes down.
Sabotaging.
How many of them, I can't say that because
I know. I shouldn't have thrown that in.
Yeah, well, they don't watch public access anyway.
Right.
But, you know, the fact of the matter is, you know, almost all these third-party DSL providers are being driven out of business.
Really?
And eventually you're going to end up just as before with the large companies, the few large companies owning all the lines and having all the customers. You look at Time Warner, AOL, same thing. You know, there are parent companies. They're not as bad as some of the others. But the fact of the matter is, there's an alarming amount of consolidation that's going there.
Merging
they own artists. They own the artist products. They own the wires that go out. They own the services that are sold. They sell information on the people. I think they also own TiVo. It came out last month.
I think so, yeah.
TiVo was collecting information on the usage by its customers and selling it, you know, to other businesses. So this is as vertically integrated
and becoming more so all the
a
time.
market
kind of consolidated down. I don't know. Was Ben Dickinson 20 years ago said there were 35 companies, and now it's down to 8 or something?
Yeah, and it's going to be 4 or 5.
85% or 4 or 5. They control 85% of what everybody sees and so forth. And those market considerations, just the society in general, the idea, a certain mindset is you can make a beautiful watercolor or something, but if it doesn't fetch $30 million at Sotheby's, it has no value. I mean,
well, even the $30 million watercolors, they didn't sell for that when the artist was alive.
No, that's right.
You know, there's a great market in dead artists. There's not much market in live artists.
Right, and if you look at the human society in general, if you look at human relationships, if you're in a human relationship where you're bargaining back and forth and making a business thing, I mean, love, all the most important human considerations, so is probably done within in a situation where people are not relating to each other in power relationships or in market relationships. It's a different kind of way in which so much of the creative part of the human spirit can manifest itself, and there's not very much within the communication system or even just creating a product and so forth where that kind of a context can happen. But public access has been little islands where this kind of thing, where people are just working together in a collaborative kind of way and not, you know, in a human kind of way, is there. And I think that's important in the long term.
Really important. In fact,
and there's so little
I feel like it's the only safety that we have is the ability to speak without a mediator. Everything else that you read or hear is being mediated by somebody who has an interest which is not stated up front.
That's right. That's right, except in access, in a certain sense. So it stands apart. Now, I heard you say, maybe you could fill us in a little, because, you know, I heard you say that we have this in Manhattan. So we have 4 channels going 20 hours a day or something like that.
Yeah.
Filled up. Must be a heck of a job trying to administer it. And I congratulate you all on having been able to pull it off.
Well, it's a great staff.
Yeah, that's true. You do have a lot of good people. You have that. But we have these places around the country. What's the status of public access generally nationally, or if you can touch into it internationally and so forth? How's it going? What's it doing? Is it growing in strength? Are there problems? And what is the possibility of these islands where that kind of an attitude, that non-commercial kind of attitude that is characteristic of a lot of what motivates the artistic community, I think, the creative community, what's the status as far as you do, as you look out across the country?
I think we're stronger than ever in the United States.
Community.
Just talking about, well, you just think about it. You know, at one point, nobody had the idea of the concept, so we had to put forward the concept,
20, 30 years ago,
and people had to learn the equipment, which is no small thing. I know a lot of people look at some public access shows and wonder about the quality, but when you think about it, you know, what is the quality of the handwriting of somebody in the first grade? You know what I mean?
Right.
And so, you know, it's a progressive thing. You've been doing this 30 years.
Yeah, 31 years.
I think
we got the first porta pack off the boat back in '69 or something, or the second. Yeah.
Yeah. So you're pretty sure about what you're doing. You have a pretty good concept of what it takes to make a show. Actually, I've watched. You have it pretty well set. You've got it down. But a lot of the people who are first coming in, they don't know that.
Yeah, you got to learn.
So you look. You know, you would expect things to get better over 20 years, and they have. The equipment has gotten much better and much cheaper,
I want to talk about
due to the microchip revolution.
Right.
But more importantly, people understand it a lot better. You know, when it first came out, nobody even knew how to identify it. When we do all of our studies, public access.
Yeah, okay.
You know, like if you said, what's public access in Minnesota, that meant where you put your boat in the water or something like that. You know, but now if you talk to, especially young people, public access has existed their whole life, so it's a little bit different for them.
Yeah.
There's over 3,000 access facilities of one kind or another in the
3,000 in the United States?
Yeah, in the country.
3,000.
We produce somewhere between 25 and 30,000 hours of first-run programming per week, which is more than all the other broadcasters combined. So it's a huge movement, and it's really good. It's not just individuals, but a lot of times it's a lot of work with institutions. As you know, we have people, community producers here who are working with the United Nations. You know, we show the Archdiocese. We also have comedy programs, you know, whatever it is, 95 to 100 programs in foreign languages, including 3 programs in Magyar. You know, most people don't even know what that is.
That's Hungarian.
Hungarian, right. So so it's strong in that sense. I think there's some imminent danger, though.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, what are the sources societally? Let's say you've got leaders, shakers, on the one hand you have the society that's consolidating down all these business considerations, fewer and fewer companies, dog eat dog, business competition, so forth. What are the forces in society that encourage or give encouragement to this idea of there being off here on the side or wherever it is, access which has an ethos which is counter to what the general society has?
I think...
public-spirited citizens, political leadership, this kind of thing.
There's some of that. I think, you know, you have to look structurally. You know, first of all, there's the First Amendment, so it's already been sort of codified what a lot of people understand around the world in various ways, but in the United States it's codified that people have the right to speak. So there's some understanding of that. Number 2, not all countries have public right-of-way laws, which the United States does.
Okay, public right-of-way
ways, which means that all the wires that we're talking about for the cable systems run, you know, through the underground or on poles that are set in the ground, and that the cities, by federal law, have the right to regulate that.
Okay.
And I think this is
that's political.
This is
vis-a-vis the company.
Well, this is very, very important because that means that as long as the franchise fees and the support of access in its 3 forms are assets of the cities, that the cities, you know, through the League of Cities and the National Association of Telecommunications Officers and Administrators and various other groups.
Which is part of the structure of the operation, the administration of the city itself.
Yeah, politically they'll support this because, you know, it has a direct impact on a local level.
Right. Sure, it's to their advantage in that sense, It should be. And then they can help negotiate with the cable company in order to get as much support as they can for the idea.
Here's where the problem falls, though.
Yeah.
The problem falls that most of the cable companies, or the majority of the people who get cable, get it from cable companies, which are huge.
Yeah, sure.
And so they can act on a federal and state level, and there's various movements, first of all, to try to get all of this moved to the state level, where, of course, the people won't be as answerable to the local communities with regard to public access.
They're trying to get
to get all of the franchising moved to state levels,
as opposed to
local level.
Local
so
level.
that, in other words, right now, if the franchise comes up and your mayor or your borough presidents, in the case of New York, do not support public educational or government access as part of the franchise agreement, you can hold them directly accountable.
Right. Yeah.
But if it goes to the state level,
it's going to be off and
then who do you even talk to?
Right.
You know, do you know? Name your your public service commission.
No, I don't.
Can't do it.
No, I don't.
No.
No.
You know,
right.
so that would be a problem.
Now, what are the forces that are trying to do that? Business force? Or
yeah, the cable companies, for the most part. There's various actions around the country where they've tried to do that.
I've done over the long haul, a lot of people that are in the cable industry, particularly in the old days. I remember I did a program, if I could, it was Brian Lamb. I think he's got this C-SPAN that is such a good force, it seems to me.
Now, that's actually produced by the cable companies.
It is the cable companies, and the cable company industry, there are some people I know, just from personally having talked to them and sort of, who support the idea of public access. I mean, the people in the cable industry are supporting it. Brian Lamb does. He thinks it's a good idea. I know.
I think there's been movement in that direction, especially with the advent of the satellite services, which, of course, don't have public access.
Yeah,
and therefore, we become a service that they're offering that's extremely localized, that the satellite services cannot offer.
Sure, if nothing else, for public relations. I mean, you show the local football game or something, and they can spin it off as public relations.
Well, this is good business.
But even, all right, that has a business. For people who can think in a large scale rather than just count beans and so forth, there are people who think that they can see that it is, and there are people of vision within the industry and so forth that can see that. But I was just going to say that it isn't as though there's some public-spirited political people or something, or community organizers aligned against an intransible, a group of cable operators that are against it. A lot of those people within the cable industry can be in support of it.
A lot of people
within
the industry are in support of it, but you mentioned a group of cable operators, and the group is called the National Cable Television Association. Yeah, and the NCTA is exactly who I'm talking about. They're very short-sighted, and they're always fighting against access. And they're very difficult for us to deal with. Let's say you're running for president. Do you think you can afford to not be liked by CNN? Do you think you can afford to not be liked by NBC News or Viacom or anything? No, you can't do it. They don't only own cable systems. They own the newspapers. We got a new FCC chair who is the son of the Secretary of State. Colin Powell's son is the head of the FCC. Colin Powell was on the board of AOL Time Warner, received something like an $8 million bonus when he left to go back into the Bush administration. The first thing that happened when it was declared that Bush won was that the FTC approved the AOL Time Warner merger, and then the FCC under Michael Powell did exactly the same. He has said in public, I kid you not, that he doesn't believe that the government has any business trying to equal any kind of electronic divide between the rich and the poor, the access divide. In fact, he said he believes there's a Mercedes divide. He wants a Mercedes, but he doesn't believe the government should have to buy him one. This is who's in charge of the FCC now. So right now you've got a deregulatory FCC. You've got a deregulatory majority on the Supreme Court. You've got a small deregulatory majority in the Senate. You've got a deregulatory majority in the House, and you've got a deregulatory president who, does not believe that these things need to take place.
Out of public community support,
Right. We are,
but that's why I was questioning whether there are not voices within the industry itself that are in support of public access. Is it a unified?
I just said, there are people who recognize it. But when it comes down to
at the
but you know what? Table. If you're depending on someone else to protect you, forget it.
All right.
You're just going to offer yourself up and be vulnerable? No. No.
Okay.
No. if I'm, and I'm not faulting anybody's
No, I'm
character.
understanding the realities.
If I'm in charge of seeing a profit for my company,
Mm-hmm.
then I want every piece of that bandwidth to be bringing me the most profit possible.
Unless
so there's always this pressure,
Yeah.
you know, to justify how something that doesn't directly bring in a profit brings in another profit.
Unless there are some people who do have vision, see there's something other than bean counting, the small view kind of view of things. And but that goes into our whole political
Don't
process.
count on it.
I know.
They always,
one
they always
people
lose
with vision,
because
yeah.
because
The good
even
guys,
when you
right?
talk about business in the United States,
Yeah.
and I think this view came out of Harvard. I'm not sure. You probably know more than me. But the idea is that it's a quarterly statement that's important, not even an annual statement.
right.
The quarterly
Yeah,
report is
right.
what statement that's important, and you make the decision based on coming out good at the end of every single quarter.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, and they measure it like that. So
Is that long term?
No, not at
No,
all.
it's not.
No. And the finance guys have taken over from people that used to have some sense of service and these kind of things. Things have changed and so forth.
You know, I was talking with a friend of mine, like this, and you know, when communism and capitalism were fighting, there was at least some feeling of balance. You know, like capitalism really needed to promote its bright side in order to counter.
Now it doesn't have to.
Well, you know, once there's like one major business in every sector of the economy instead of like a whole lot of competitors, then essentially capitalism will have become communism without a mission statement.
I see that,
you know, like communism
yeah.
may have been bad, but at least had the mission statement, we serve the people.
Yeah,
you know, we're getting ready to have Stalinism without even the mission statement.
Well, I
you know
see.
what I mean?
Yeah. Well, it could be seen that way, and I don't know where it's heading yet because there's no. Yeah, and then there doesn't seem to be any need to try and examine the. I don't know. We just did a program whether or not the society is heading for. I don't know. Was it our Congressman Jerome Nadler who said on election night there's a whiff of fascism in the air. I mean, this is something that could be a dangerous kind of thing, and the public access could be a place that would be able to, in a
That's
certain
why
sense,
you gotta have
let
it.
the people have a say in a situation where the possibility of them doing that are being retreated on many, many sides within the corporate and the general society.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so it's really important.
This is where it's extremely
and it
important
should be
because
picked up
it's
by,
a small rudder,
yeah, but
it's
it's
really
a small
important.
little trim tab or
Yeah.
a little cyber something. But I mean, it should be picked up by people in positions of political influence and so forth. It would seem to me. Do we have some strong political supporters within the Senate, within the people that are recognized as that? And then what about the association you mentioned, the Federation of Local Cable Producers or something? Do they have that? And, you know, in general, I was trying to say, aren't there people who are in support of the general idea that people should be able to have something like public access? Because on the surface, it seems like an extremely American thing for there to be encouragement
absolutely,
of.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And there are people, there's people, you know, elected, and there's organizations like the Alliance for Community Media, you know, which support it and so forth. The ACLU has been of some help. You know, there's a lot of organizations, People for the American Way.
Yeah.
There have even been some surprisingly, there's some people who would be considered within the extreme right wing of you know, elected officials who are also becoming very concerned about issues of privacy and voice for the public. You know, notably, I've heard some statements from Dick Armey and from Robert Barr, who normally would be like far on the extreme of the right, who are somewhat alarmist about the way that things are going. So I think there will be a trend, more so, of people who are not particularly radical, realizing how important it is to establish and protect a voice.
Yeah.
My only concern is that to the degree that people are able to buy into this mass consolidation of communications resources, it may be too late by the time things happen. Because, for instance, the level of information which is being collected on your activities, either on the web or watching television or just everywhere, it's absolutely Carnivore's one.
Yeah.
This Visage thing.
Yeah.
You know Visage?
No, I don't know
Visage
that.
is the
No, I don't know that.
company that had the cameras down there at the Super Bowl where they
Yes, they took every
scanned
face.
every
They got
single
face recognition technology.
Face recognition technology.
Well,
and I've listened to them speak. I've gone to a place where I actually heard them speak, and they were saying, well, you know, we're not using the information. We're not saving the information. And besides, your face is public and so forth.
Yeah.
So what does this mean?
Orwell,
What does this mean when you decide to attend a demonstration.
Yeah.
You know, when face scanning technology
Better
is
not.
scanning
Your
everybody.
face will be scanned and
You'll
put
be
into
in
the
there.
database, and it'll be there. And
Exactly.
You just pull down 1984 and read it every 6 months. You know. If you see things in a certain kind of way, it's developing. And yet, on the other hand, there is this technological development that's coming so quickly. We went through a couple of things. That's coming, in a certain sense, through a lot of market systems and so forth. The digital development, the microprocessor revolution, the fact that digital equipment now is becoming more and more sophisticated equipment that can do more and more with less and less resource at a cheaper and cheaper. Technology is getting to be where it can be in the hands of the people in a way that has never been characteristic. When you and I started in television, it was all great big Ampex machines. You had to have a great big institution around to support. Yeah, you had to have all that stuff. But now it's getting down to where it can be on the desktop. We've got nonlinear editing coming down, Final Cut Pro, you know, things that are getting into the hands of the people, and that is an encouraging development, is it not? And it's not that development in the spirit of public access, and particularly also some of the people that are in the non-commercial use, since public access is in a non-commercial mode of thinking in a certain sense, with the non-commercial use of the Internet, and there's some allegiances that can be drawn, particularly as the technological developments go ahead, even though some of those technological developments may be driven by economic considerations. There's a possibility for what might be seen as sort of a liberating context for the liberated artistic human spirit to emerge, and we can take a positive view. There might be some positive things we can see.
No, there's a lot of positive, but you know what? It's like you're wanting to plant a seed, and Monsanto is saying they have
Terminator seed.
Yeah, they have a patent on the gene structure of that seed. You know, there's all these possibilities are there, but you know, the same thing that makes it possible for it to be positive for you makes it possible for it to be negatively used against you by other people. And so it's really important, you know, I'm not trying to be totally negative, but I'm saying this is why you have to push this really hard, because there is nothing inherent in the way that things are set up that says this is going to exist 5 years from now.
You mean access you're talking
access.
about? Yeah.
And in fact, I think it's important for those who love access to try to find redundant means of providing access, so that if the regulatory or legislative framework which supports the way that things are now disappears
so that it's all in the hands of bean counters.
You need to be able to continue. So that, for instance, the main two tasks facing any access facility are alternative means of funding, but more importantly, alternative means of distribution, because essentially what we are doing is distributing the voice, because you can talk right now. You can talk at home by yourself, and nobody's listening to you, right? So distribution is a major thing.
Yeah, of course.
So that's why we've gone to the Internet streaming.
Right. Now, if I may, we've done it here at Manhattan Network. They have this streaming all 4 channels, which is amazing. It can be seen all over. And how much has the public access community around the country and so forth been able to get to that stage and done that? And are they seeing it as a premier
popping
thing?
up.
It is happening,
It's
right?
popping
to
up.
what degree do we know?
Olelo is doing it, which is in Honolulu. Akaku, which is in Maui, is also doing it. Telecommunications are seen very differently in Hawaii. There's several others around the country that are doing it. And I think it's really important not just to stream the channels, but to show people how to do streams themselves, which means also that you don't necessarily take advantage of the fact that an access center has a larger budget and can do it by just putting it at a stream farm, you know, where there's servers and other people handle it, but that the people here, notably Kenyatta and Ludi, you know, who are working
Those
here,
are the technical engineers.
the computer folks. What they've done here is, you know, we set a mandate, and they adhered to the idea that the streaming had to be replicable. You know, it had to be something that an access center and even an individual or a community organization could replicate. So instead of going for $10,000 or $20,000 servers, they've done it all on Macintoshes. All on, in fact, some of them are reused Macintoshes, stuff that we stopped using in other areas.
And this is something that can be replicatable by smaller institutions or by individuals.
We streamed one channel for under $5,000 a piece. Each channel for under $5,000 a piece, plus the cost of whatever line. And even more importantly,
$5,000 a piece over what period of time?
No, that's the equipment cost.
Okay,
it's
right.
like $5,000,
yeah,
more or less.
Yeah, okay,
including
right.
software,
yeah.
and then whatever cost you have for streaming. But even more importantly, we're trying to figure out and think we have an idea for distributed streaming.
What's that?
Well, yeah, exactly. What's that? What is a broadcast station? Voices feed into one antenna. That one antenna speaks loudly for everybody.
Yeah.
Right? If you're in a state of war, of course, airplane comes along, bombs the antenna, the voice is gone.
Yeah.
Also, one person takes over the voice. Rupert Murdoch buys the antenna.
Rupert Murdoch's buying increasingly.
Buys the antenna, and then nobody else can speak except as he agrees, right?
Yeah.
So that's not what we want. Even if we're public access and we're trying to be democratic, we don't want a system where one person gets to decide what's democratic.
Right.
So for every political system, there's a technological model which follows the philosophy of that system. Broadcast, dictator.
All right.
Distributed, democracy.
Distributed distribution.
Yeah.
Well, that's
So
the model of the Internet,
You
is
want
it
a
not?
lot. Well, that's what it's supposed to be, but it's not necessarily. Again, you have to set up things so that, for instance, if we set up our streaming at one of the high-priced streaming farms, everything takes place there. But look at the community. Is the community poor? No. The community has a huge amount of resources spread over a large number of people and disorganized. Same with the access centers. So that instead of going to a model where you have one server streaming all of your stuff, why not
distributed servers?
Why not have, say, a community group which also is operating on the same model, and they have the same couple of Macintoshes, and you've got another group in another part of town. Right now, all of our signal goes anywhere in Manhattan we want via the cable system. So we could very well have streaming taking place at a community group over another Macintosh. So when you come to our site and you click on the link that says, I want to see channel 34, you don't know if you're seeing it coming from our server at M&N or if you've been bounced to another friendly server somewhere else. So that instead of having one huge server and keep expanding that server by hundreds of thousands of dollars to serve thousands of streams at one time.
Which is the way the industry's going.
Yeah, but why not? If in our case we have a community base, all we have to do is organize those links so that everybody that's online, not just here, but in other parts of the world even, that stream can come from anywhere. As long as you click here and our server is set up to really understand like which other community servers are online and bounce you to those servers, that stream can come out of there. And they can make use of whatever bandwidth they have, whatever computer capacity they have.
Right. And that's in the spirit that public access itself was born.
Exactly.
That's a democratic spirit.
And in fact, sooner or later, you could have a series of channels that were worldwide, that were a confederation of people who are not bound together, but who have agreed to work together.
I'm not real familiar, but wasn't the ARPANET, when it was set up that way, it was to guard against atomic being knocked out by atomic explosion or something, and so it was very
and that's the way the internet still is. That way, so that when you send email to your friend in California, it doesn't go as one group. It's broken up into, I think, 512K packets, which are constantly being sent on different routes, and then it's reassembled.
And if anyone is knocked out, it'll still go through, and that was done as a kind of thing. So that's important. That's important.
That's what we're trying to do,
The Internet is an incredibly important development. Public access, it seems to me like public access was a pioneering kind of adventure in terms of the people having access to it. There are people that are involved in the Internet with a let's say, for want of a better term, a democratic impetus toward the use of it and so forth. They're natural allies. And the Internet world and the thing that's developing is like, in a certain sense, it's like the cavalry coming to the in support of the mission
like you said,
that the democratic
there's
notion
an abundance
of access.
there, like you said before, going back to what you said.
And we have George Gilder now. George Gilder giving us, because we haven't talked about bandwidth and things that are coming, but they're going into molecular computing now. They're going into nanotechnology, and the stuff is coming just exponentially, faster than exponentially. And John Gilder writes in Telecosm that he says, get ready, we're having unlimited bandwidth. And he uses the term, we're coming to an end of scarcity in terms of the communication capability.
He's lost his mind.
Well, you think so, yeah?
Well, he's lost his mind, because he's talking about the end of scarcity, which ideally, could be true.
Well, if it is, that's a big
But
transformation.
You think that's going to happen?
I don't know.
Come on.
No, but it might happen whether we want it to
on.
or not, in a certain sense. No, you don't see that happening in terms of.
No, the genie gets out of the bottle, they build a bigger bottle. The genie gets out again, they build a bigger bottle. And the only time there's any freedom is when the genie's out of the bottle. You know, but they're going to bottle it up.
You don't think the genie can get out of the
Do
bottle
you
for
think,
good?
No. Do you think?
Or we're going
no.
into some sort of. You
No.
don't think
Well,
no.
you know, if the genie could get out of the bottle for good, then we should just all die because there's nothing else to live for.
No,
you know, in other words,
yeah, but it becomes
life is movement.
Well,
you know, and you're always going to have to be moving. There's nothing in the universe that's at rest.
There's nothing at rest because of the second law of thermodynamics, or the thing is, but we have all this knowledge. Everything is a seamless web. Everything is connected to everything else, and we're getting to where we just had a guy in here. We were talking about, you know, the microprocessor and so forth. All this, the neurotransmitters, the structure of the brain, biochemistry of the genome. We have the knowledge. We have the technologically augmented capability. Every day when you watch,
but I don't have it. That stuff is patented.
Every night when we watch the news hour with Mr. Lara, and you've got Mr. Brinkley saying there's no problem producing enough food for everybody. There's no problem. It's just a matter of having a system that allows us to do what we're
So how come everybody's not eating?
Well, it's because that we have this capability, but we didn't have that capability in a historical context. And now in a knowledge base, and we know now we started 200,000 years ago, Homo sapiens sapiens, we all come out of Africa from a common gene pool, and we've got this incredible capability and a knowledge base for understanding it that we simply haven't had, I mean, except in a, and we're coming to some sort of a crescendo or some sort of an understanding that this may be a time of some sort of a qualitative transformation in the broader evolution of universal consciousness itself.
I agree that the
there's a
possibility
case
is there.
to be made for that now where it couldn't have been made
in 1900. It depends on the will.
1900.
It depends
on
the collective will of the people.
Right.
And the people have very differing interests. Do you think people are starving in Africa because there's not enough food?
It is not because of that, because we don't have a political or economic system that allows us to do what we're capable of doing.
It's not even just allow. Some of it's on purpose. There are people who purposely want Africa depopulated so the land can be held in trust for their own children.
I believe that could be.
You know, how is it that this many people in Africa have AIDS and that there are drugs available and that there's...
it's a disgrace. Absolutely horrendous.
You can produce them more
well, now the market's going to bring some from India.
On scale.
Yeah, right.
Well, they had to fight for that from India. Al Gore, you know, who I voted for, went down in South Africa and told them that if they produced drugs to heal the 28% of their people that have AIDS, that they would face sanctions, and we couldn't get sanctions against South Africa for apartheid for 20 years.
I dig it.
That is wickedness.
Yeah, I know.
So there's benign neglect, but there's also wickedness, and don't make any doubt about it. That I can tell you from good sources. That there are countries, which I will not name, which are trying to identify the genome of their enemies so that they can produce poisons that are gene-specific.
Right.
I could name these countries. I will not name them on the air, but you know they exist. So that for every Linus Pauling who is out there who is trying to help people, there's another sick person over there too. So make no mistake about it. I have been one of these people who has been saying that we all should become one. And I did not think this out clearly. And I actually have some pause about this right now. You know, because I look at
What do you mean become one? I don't know.
You know, like the whole world should act as one, you know, in a John Lennon sense. You know,
the whole
world be as one.
Imagine there's no,
But look at you. You know, you're a human being, but you're made up of, say, how many billion? 5 billion cells? 6 billion cells?
No, we have it's hard to believe. I mean, I had a hard time at it, but I've checked it, it's true. 100 trillion cells in a human organism.
So these cells,
each cell is semi-permeable.
I
mean, it's a system. And the DNA, there's a communication system. All those cells are in communication with one another.
What do you call it when one of the cells decides that it's going to act differently?
It's called a cancer. That's a runaway cell. It's a runaway growth.
And
it's a cancer.
So to some degree, you know, to some view of this oneness, you might be a cancer because you're talking about some degree of freedom when actually your script might be written for you right now.
Well, the thing is, the script is written for us. Well, that's a big question. We can start answering some of these big questions, and I don't know that it's so. I mean, I just go back to Fuller, Buckminster Fuller, and he said there's an a priori mysterious design. There's an a priori mystery. I don't say we can get out of that. But the second law of thermodynamics, that everything moves toward the limit, to chaos, to the limits of the system.
That's it.
Cast about for a countervailing force. It is biological evolution, apex by mankind. There is a purpose to our being here, and it is to understand the process and bring it there. And that we may be a time, and James Joyce, my favorite line that I quote a lot is, history is a nightmare from which we're attempting to awaken. And I have the sense that we are at a point when you talk about the capability that we have collectively and so forth, if we find an economic and a political system that really lets us do, in a systems way, what we're now have the abstract capability of doing, that we may be a time of qualitative transformation or of sort of like a liberation where it past zero sum and where we can, in a certain sense, see that it's all part of a system and every cell is important. Big challenge is justice, to where every cell is involved. You got 6 billion people heading for 10. So many of them are not able to participate in anything but the most rudimentary way. Half the population has $2 a day they live on or something, and it's absolute grinding poverty and so forth. And we don't have to put up with, I mean, we have the means of superseding that now. So that's another countervailing great change to the possibilities of a overweening fascistic kind of system that one can see. There's a great hope in the time in which we live, but this communication system of a human organism, each DNL, each cell is in communication with every other cell in a human healthy organism. We need that analogy probably to bring. And the big challenge is justice, to involve all human beings, just so we involve all healthy cells in an organism. Everybody has to be involved in that. And there's a great number of people to be heard from that have not been heard from within the context of the institutions that we've inherited from history. Maybe there's something transformative about the time in which we live, is what I'm saying.
Well, I think we essentially agree, but I think the point I'm
And
I'm
the
trying to
voice
make.
from that might well come from places like public access and their allies and that kind of thing.
But see, this is the point that I'm trying to make, and it relates to all that, because I don't think you and I are disagreeing philosophically about what ought to be. But what I'm trying to make, not for you, but for the people who might be wide awake listening to this for whatever reason, that there's a difference between hope and work. You know, that it's all well and good to see the potential of all of these things that we're talking about. The potential is wonderful, and it's great, and that's what's called hope. But I'm telling you, hope may keep you alive, but what you got to do is work. That by your promotion of public access, whatever field people happen to be in, they need to work for these things, because there are countervailing forces which are greedy and can make just as much use of all these things against you as you can make use for this better society. That you have to work, because any sleepiness, at this time and place in history, you will not be able to recover from, because the level of control that is offered by computing and by microchip technology and nanotechnology and all these things is so tremendous that if you don't put in some checks and balances at this point in history, there will be no chance to go back at a later time.
Oh, that's really interesting, and it's probably absolutely correct. There's a piece, I don't know if I mentioned to you, there's a piece in the New York Times yesterday, or Saturday, this last Saturday, from Movie Talk. A fellow, I forget his name, is Saunders, out there, and he's saying that we have computer systems now that are going to be able to, he said, we do not have the need for Alan Greenspan at the Federal Reserve Board to set the funds. It can all be done by a computer system. The economic decision-making process itself, even, Ray Kurzweil has said that they got translating telephones now, absolutely sociological phenomenon. You speak into a telephone, your voice is translated into languages of the world in your voice. It's amazing. And now they've developed a thing where he said in about 8 years, the economic decision-making process is going to be so put into these computer capability that it is going to not in any way, any individual human being to make a decision within the economic decision would not be able to be rivaled by it, and it'll be the way in which economic decision-making is going to be done is by these cybernated systems and so forth.
God help us.
You think
God help us.
Yeah, but it might also, well, perhaps so, you think.
Because what is a computer? A computer doesn't even exist. What you have is a computer programmer. So all we're doing is moving ourselves one step away. So instead of at least seeing Alan Greenspan saying whatever they've told him to say, we'll be looking at a computer that appears to be objective, but that was programmed by some person who we don't even know for whatever purpose.
That that'll come?
I think it's ridiculous.
You do, right?
Yeah.
You think it'll always be that political decision-making process by those guys that are running the
I don't
show.
believe in Alan Greenspan. Who is he?
No. It's just the individual input to
I think what they need to do is give land back to the people and let people be connected back to the land and the processes of life.
Right.
You know,
absolutely.
I'm looking at everything that we're talking about. You know, we're talking about good mediation and bad mediation, but ultimately, you know, it's the fact that people can live their lives that's going to determine, you know, whether they're human beings or whether they're just microchips.
Absolutely. Well, if they're the microchips, or if they're going to take over, these technologies are going to take that over. They're going to create. Bucky Fuller said we transcended a condition where we were in scarcity. The fact that we have these augmented technological capabilities, extension of our consciousness, is leading us into a particular time, which may have a liberating potentiality of providing the material sustenance needed by everybody. It can be provided, as Archer Daniel Midland tells us every day, if they had an economic system that would allow that to happen, and it might free humanity for real humanistic values, where the things that really matter, like creativity, love, these kind of things, instead of being everybody turned into the grist.
But see, you hit on something very important early in the conversation, and I just don't think you should miss the importance of it. You said, you know, that the freedom of access exists within an abundance. But
that the abundance is what we're saying perhaps is coming.
Well, no, the abundance always comes. And then it's filled. And it's not abundant anymore. And then it comes, and then it's filled, and it's not abundant anymore. And so you have this constant fluxus. This is why I say there's not going to be a rest. There's a fluxus. You have the abundance of cable, and then you have the tightness of cable. But then it's relieved by the abundance of internet bandwidth.
Right.
And then that bandwidth is being controlled and so forth. You have the abundance of grain. And then the grain was used to enslave the workers to build pyramids. You have the abundance of the Industrial Revolution, which then became the enslavement of people into
to build the railroads.
Into doing stuff 12 and 18 hours a day.
You
have the abundance of the computer, and then you have the computer controlling every aspect of your life. It's going to go up, and it's going to come down. It's going to go up, and it's going to come down. And this is what you got to recognize. If you're going to be farsighted, is you've got to be able to look ahead and see where's this next abundance going to be. You got to run up there, and you got to shout to everybody as fast as you can before they clamp down on you.
This is the way to the promised land. But there is still hope alive. I mean, keeping the hope alive that we may be able to arrive. And if we do, we're going to arrive at a situation. There's a Chinese expression that says, "Save me from living in exciting times." We're out of that now because these are incredibly exciting times. The things that are going on in all kinds of fields, and there should be a way of communicating it. I don't know. I'm trying to hold out the idea that we may be that the Renaissance may have not even yet begun. That people are going to be able to live the artistic life as a given, rather than having the artistic and the loving and the important human values being ground up within a materialistic context that they are forced to live within. There maybe we'll get liberated from that to where the human spirit will be able to really manifest itself. And if it does in a communications way, a pioneering entity that was like in a beginning way was public access, it seems to me, with the links that are in the communication system of the internet and so forth is emerging, extremely important. And I want to thank you for having participated in the early development of that sort of thing and that kind of thing. And here in New York, too. It's an extremely important thing here in New York, but on a world scale. It's a huge subject, and it's one that we all should understand. Happy to have been able to share some of these thoughts with you.
Thanks for letting me on the show with the myriad of wonderful guests and topics that you've had over the years. I think you have a far-sighted, far-ranging program. So
it is. There's a lot to be interested in. Anyway, so thanks a lot. It's been your pleasure. The Perception, Tony Riddle, Anthony Riddle, Executive Director, Manhattan Neighborhood Network, sort of scratching the surface of the implications of communications and other things, political, economic, and sociological, and intellectual in the universe at this particular time. We invite you to tune in and come back next time. We'll be here at the same time. That's it for now. Tony, once again, thanks a lot for everything.
Thank you.
And we'll see you next time. So.
Well, I appreciate it.
Yeah, it just goes on and on and on. But
I know, it should be a 3-hour show. Remind me
16 easy. 16. You just sit down and talk about it. Because they're all interrelated. But I just have that feeling that something's about to, that just I don't know, the economic